Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nader. We have a special episode today. I have my friend over here, Martin, actually reached out to me on the channel, and we wanted to actually work on a kind of new idea here. So it's actually all Martin's idea, so I'm going to give him all the credit for this. I'll get him to introduce himself in a second, but I just want to give a bit of a background on this. Martin's going to be going through a bootcamp. And I think I'll let him talk more about this, but generally we want to actually see if we can record this set of videos as Martin goes through this boot camp for however long that we can without getting too I guess bored of it or burnt out from it, and seeing kind of how his journey progresses and how kind of the different topics go, and we'll actually do some coaching and some mentoring and some problem solving together, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So it's going to be as real as possible here. We're going to try no edits, no cuts. So you can see Martin shaking in his boots a little bit over there. But yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. So I guess without further ado, we'll kind of get more into kind of a bit of how that's all going to work and the logistics of that. But I'd like to kind of introduce Martin here. So welcome, Martin, and thanks for doing this. I think we had a little preamble right before we had this the recording, but I just want to say thank you for taking the time to actually reach out and be courageous enough to do this and to stream it in front of however many thousands of people are going to end up watching it. I think it's going to be a great service for the JavaScript community and people going through boot camps as well. So I guess, do you mind maybe just kind of walking us through a little bit about yourself and kind of your journey and your background and what made you interested in kind of getting into full stack web development?
Sure. Well, first I want to start off by thanking you, for the opportunity, because getting the chance to be in front of somebody that has so much experience, and tell me where I'm going wrong and tweak me and clean up and polish my skills is definitely a huge advantage. So thank you. When I messaged you, I honestly, it was a shot in the dark. I didn't even think you were gonna open the message. I was gonna be like, who's this guy? You know what I mean? But thank you so much. So I really do appreciate it. But yeah. So my name is Martin. I'm originally from Texas, from South Texas. I was born in McAllen. I was raised there, my entire life. And a lot of people at this point would probably tell you how how hard they probably worked since the get-go, how they were probably good at math, or they were probably good at so and so and everything. And I'm entering this as honest as I possibly can. I was not that guy. I was the guy who was lazy in a smart way. I was the guy who would always get 70s and 75s in school, and I was smart enough to know how much I can relax without going under. You know what I mean? That's what I was all my life. But I was always in theater. I was a theater person, but I loved acting. It was my passion. I did it all through high school. Same thing in college. I went ahead and I majored in college. And it was a blast. I learned a lot. That's where I met my now girlfriend that I've been together for, I want to say, like 8-9 years already. Thank you. So yeah, and then after that, we decided to make the move and move to LA and be close to the work, because I wanted to be an actor in front of the camera. I've done stage work all my life, singing and musicals and and regular plays and stuff. But I wanted to be in front of the camera. And from the research that we were told, LA is where it's at, and she had the same idea. So we were like, let's make the move, So we went ahead and did that. And I, unfortunately, just a little side note, she actually drove the entire way. It was insane. She drove the entire, I think it was like maybe like 18-19 hours, not in one sitting, but like it was because I didn't have my license. I barely got my license maybe like 5-6 years ago, maybe, which kind of brings me maybe to like my upbringing is my mother left me as a baby. She I know her first name. She's a pretty horrible person. You know what I mean? Not to get too much into that, but yeah, she's a pretty horrible person. And my dad was in jail for a lot of my life growing up, so I really didn't have a father. I was raised by my grandma. And it was ups and downs in that end, which was kind of one of the reasons why I never really thought about getting my license. It was kind of like me, like having a car, like no way, like there's no way they'll even trust me driving, so I never did that. So that she drove all the way to California, and being there, and I think I can speak to a lot of people where I think right now we have a lot of people trying to, which is, I'm completely guilty of this, and so is my girlfriend, is we're a lot of people are guilty of trying to take shortcuts,
Mm,
trying to find the shortcut in, oh, how do I become successful, like in
mhm,
the fastest amount of time.
mhm,
I
mhm,
think a lot of people do that. There's a lot of scams out there, and
mhm,
unfortunately I went down so many of them, from
mm.
real estate, being in real estate, from pyramid schemes and everything like that. I became a streamer. Now, I'm not saying that, like, streaming is necessarily like a pyramid scheme or anything, but I did try my hand at that because I wanted to become this streamer and
Right.
rich and stuff, and
Famous. Yeah.
exactly. And I slowly, as I grew older, I kind of started to realize what was most important to me.
Mm,
And that was kind of basically blocking out all of the mess that's outside of the things that you should really care about, which is yourself, your health, your family, you know what I mean? Like your kids, if you have kids, your pets, and I said to myself, what am I doing? If I want to become something valuable in life,
mm,
I need to do the work for it. I
mhm,
need to.
mhm,
So that's where coding came. I did my research and, like, what's a good sustainable. I may have to bust my ass to get there. You know what I mean? But I want to do it because I want to. I want to provide. I want the best for my little family that I have. And that's where I did so much research, and it's been a bumpy road so far because coding is really hard, but I think I do see myself doing that as a career. So yeah,
That
so here
that
I am.
that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I know it's always tough to share that, especially online. But I think a lot of people hopefully can resonate with that. Honestly, kudos to you for sharing that, but also kind of getting through all of that and coming out the other end as unscathed as it seems as you are right now. That's really strong, strong of you. Can we dig a little bit into that? Because I'm actually kind of curious because I think we had a little bit of a talk before this, but I'd like to really kind of focus on that part because it's really important. I think I mentioned that, like, this field of programming, software engineering, development, there's, at least historically, a lot of people who kind of are typically like, math majors and physics majors and computer science, and they kind of, I was the kind of person who, fiddled with my TV antenna since I was 6 years old, and I knew that from the womb that I was going to be a computer scientist, right? And you have like those kind of people, which are fantastic. And we definitely need those kinds of people, but there's definitely like the stereotypes about computer scientists and web developers and development and things like that. And what we're seeing recently, especially with these rise of different boot camps and kind of a society just generally being a bit more open and understanding of each other, is kind of an influx of people from other backgrounds like yourself, and even, I would argue, even myself to some degree. Can you maybe kind of walk us through like what made you maybe go into kind of acting? Like what made you interested in that field, and how did you kind of realize, I guess, like, you kind of hinted at it, like you kind of had this like epiphany, oh, I want to do something with my life, but like what made you go from there, which is kind of quite over here. Like if you think of it from the left brain, right brain kind of perspective, a lot of people are like, whoa, that's like way over here, and then you kind of shift it to like way over here. I would argue they're actually the exact same thing. But kind of, can you walk us through that mental process and how you jump through those hoops and you got to kind of where you are today, where you're actually trying to become a developer?
Yeah, so I would say that my my love for acting, I think a lot about, my kind of way of thinking, my kind of psyche, and like how I grew up, and what led me to who I am today. And I do think that that has a lot to do with, the issues with my mother and my father, and everything. So I think, I honestly, I really do think that it was a way to kind of find a home, if that makes
Mm,
sense. Like, it was a great community. It was a great community of, like, I made friends. I would argue that my friends were closer to me ever than my family was.
mhm,
And it really also It was also a lot of fun. It definitely does, uh make you use that, creative kind of sort of, here I am. I'm going to do so and so to entertain you. I'm going to try be my best at it, but I have nowhere to hide.
Right.
I have nowhere to hide. This is me. You're going to see me on a stage, so it definitely was a lot of fun. I definitely found the family that I think I never really had. And I think that's kind of why I clung on to it, but it could have happened in any community. I really do think. But the path onto being a developer in particular, I guess it was more of a kind of trial and error kind of thing. I really do think that my life has been a lot of trial and error. What works,
Mm.
what doesn't. Okay, I'm going to stay away from that. Okay, that was a wrong way to go and everything. And it was more of a try to do what works, even though it may stress you out and you may have to be doing it for a long time. Because my boot camp is, I want to say, maybe like a little over 10 months, but I mean, I would have done it if it would have taken years. Like I would have done it if it would have taken that long, because if that's how long it takes, I, I'm fine with that. I want to be like a valued member of society. I want to be valuable in what I can do for a company or for somebody and for myself, and for my family. So I think it was a lot of trial and error, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. I mean, I love that. That's a very good answer. Honestly, that's a perfect answer. I think, yeah, that's definitely a testament to, I think, your character as well. So, thanks for sharing that. Can you maybe next go into a bit about how you actually went about choosing the bootcamp? Because I think like this is kind of some of the stuff that we wanted to get into, right? Like there's just so much out there, right?
Yeah.
Do I do a certificate? Do I do a degree? Do I do a bootcamp? Do I do a master's? Like, what is my path? Do I have to get a PhD in this thing because
Yep.
I didn't have a background in this? There's AI, there's web development, there's this, all that kind of stuff, right? So when you were doing your research, like, how did you go about it? Did you have help? Was it a bunch of Googling? Was it a bunch of Redditing? Like, what was your kind of process?
Honestly, pretty much all of the above. I looked a lot of YouTube channels that interviewed people that actually went through so and so boot camp. I think I ran through maybe about like 4 or 5 boot camps. One here where I live in the city of San Antonio, that they do one as well. And I forget the others, but I also researched those. I looked up people that were interviewing, and a lot of people were saying like, no, don't go to this one. Like they kind of don't really care about it. They kind of just want to get you out the door and everything like that. So that's kind of how that went. And yeah, I definitely did use Reddit a lot. And also, one of the things that you did say too was like the stereotypes of programmers, and how they're these kind of, when you see a software developer, you're like, I could never do that.
Yeah.
I could,
Yeah.
so part of my choosing a boot camp and choosing, web developing was sort of seeing if how you say, if it was realistic, if it was doable. Because of course, like we've talked about it a good bunch, where a lot of people in this industry have imposter syndrome, you know what I mean? And they feel like, what am I doing here? They're going to fire me. I need to vote, you know what I mean? And one of those things that I saw a lot when doing a lot of research on all of these boot camps, and how all of these boot camps, everybody felt the same way. And sort of, X, Y, and Z boot camp kind of helped in that sense. They had people
Mhm.
there to mentor you. They had people there to, whenever you're stumbling, you could kind of like, message them, hey, can you help me? And the one that I'm attending, Flatiron, is really good. They have a Discord channel, they have a Slack channel. You can message them. I think they close at like 11 and everything. So the support really had to be there. But
Mhm.
also, I think it was the push to say, this boot camp is great, but the fact that they can make you feel like you can do it, like you can
Mhm.
be just like those other guys, is kind of what put it over the top.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I honestly, like, I think really that even those two words, imposter syndrome, I think that resonates pretty much with everyone. Here's a fun fact: doing this for the amount of years that I've been doing it, I still feel imposter syndrome. So for those of you watching that and hearing that, I have a YouTube channel, I'm teaching coding, and I still feel imposter syndrome. right? That should tell you, frankly, I think just a little bit on that topic for everyone here and for you as well, Martin. I think that, in my opinion, if you ever feel that you're not feeling imposter syndrome, then something is wrong, right? Because that probably means, like, I think the perspective needs to shift a little bit. I think that actually means that you're not you're not being out of your comfort zone. You're not kind of going out there taking those risks and being scared and being vulnerable. The reason I say I still feel it is I try to do things that I have no idea how to do. I try to build like a little game engine in like C or something, and then I try to do like really low level work in Rust or something some other day, right? I'm constantly pushing the boundaries, and I feel really dumb most of the time when I'm doing that stuff, and I make silly mistakes. And if I was to talk to someone doing that, they would think that I'm a total noob, right? Am I a noob? Maybe, right? Does it really matter? No, because I think I can at least competent enough to have these conversations and lead a team of developers and help in specific domains of development. But it's an ocean, right? And we only know little pockets and islands in that ocean, and it's quite arrogant to think that we know a little bit of everything. So if you ever feel that you're losing that imposter syndrome, then you should probably try different fields in development and try to get it back, because I think it's a really valuable thing to have, actually, as long as you're able to control it and to channel it properly. So let's go back to kind of that process of choosing. So you mentioned Flatiron, so that's the bootcamp that you're going to right now. So just for everyone here, that's just one of the many bootcamps available. I actually can't say that I endorse it. I don't have any commission or anything from that from the bootcamp. It's just, I think, interesting to hear from different people's experiences going through these different bootcamps, because so many of these are popping up recently. Like literally, you can go down the street in maybe whichever city you're in, and you probably see bootcamp, right? So I guess what is it specifically that you were looking for, especially I think coming from a different field? Like it's quite challenging to think of like, what do I need in software development to be successful, and how can I feel even supported? Like, what does it even mean to be supported in this field of software development? Because you're not in the field yet, so you're trying to figure that out. So how did you kind of research these boot camps? I think that'd be quite valuable for people to hear, because people watching this are probably doing that themselves, right? So like, what was your, like, did you have a bunch of metrics? Did you get all nerdy about it and have like a Google Sheets or something where you're like writing everything in an Excel file and ranking things? Did you talk to other friends and family? And like, was it a close call between two that you were choosing from? Like, kind of how did that process work?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that it was a close, you know what I mean, like neck and neck. I wouldn't say that. I think it was pretty clear on, on which one I wanted. Yeah, the way I chose, yeah, it definitely was a lot of, yeah, YouTube videos and everything and Reddit, and I went on their website too, which was really helpful. I like that they did provide statistics on how long it takes for somebody to usually get a job after they graduate, what percentage of those get paid so and so amount. I
Right.
thought that was really helpful there as well. And one of the things too that is really cool about them is that they not only have support there for you, whether it be on Slack or Discord, the cohorts, your leaders or what have you, to help you. They also have it while you're doing, like, let's say you're learning right now, like I'm learning React, right? And if I had a question on, the things that I'm reading, if I'm learning about props, you know what I mean? Or like, components and everything, and I don't understand, or if they give me an assignment and I'm just kind of like stuck, you can easily just message someone,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll jump on, hey, okay, cool. Yeah, let's jump on a Zoom. And then
Mm-hmm.
we jump on a Zoom really quickly. But not only that, but the thing that is really cool about Flatiron as well is that they also employ students until they find a job, which is also really, really cool. So, having those kinds of people there, right, above you, telling you like, this is how you do it. And by the way, like, don't worry, like, I know it doesn't make sense right now. You know what I mean? And just like whispering in your ear these things that like you just needed to hear. One of the things that they told me was that I was kind of freaking out. I'm just like, oh man, like I had this thing at the beginning where I was supposed to start, but I couldn't, and now I'm like so and so days behind and everything. And I'm freaking out and stuff. And he was like, well, just relax and everything. And he basically showed me like, how I'm supposed to do it. Just make sure that you're doing for every phase, make sure it's at least 3 months and everything like that. And by the way, like, don't get stressed out if like, you break at one point, you know what I mean? Like you kind of reach your tipping point and stuff, because it happens a lot. Like it
Mhm,
happens,
mhm,
I can't tell you how many people that I've called in, and you know what I mean. They're kind of stressing and you're not the only one. Don't feel like you're alone in this desert. You know what I mean? Like looking around, like, am I only one? Am I just stupid? Am I unable? So having those people that around you that have also been through it is just
mhm,
super invaluable.
mhm.
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think that mentorship and that coaching is a huge aspect. I think people really need to realize, like, even when you're working, frankly, and you're a dev for the first time, it's not that you're going to sit there and just code 24/7 and be able to like crank out a bunch of code. You're going to need mentorship from those above you. That's even why we're doing these calls together, and we can help each other. Even apart from these calls and stuff like that. And that is something hopefully you can pass forward to other developers as well. As you said, even when you graduate from this bootcamp, you can actually help others while you're looking for a job. That's pretty cool. So I guess really before I wanted to get to the curriculum here, because I have the syllabus open, but just so that the listeners here in the audience knows, it looks like they have kind of two kind of streams. So they have the part-time, and then they have the full-time. And then for each of those, they also have different areas that you can go into, like software development or game development or what have you. Can you maybe walk through a little bit of that, and how you actually went choosing from even that group of different components?
I'm gonna be honest. From what I remember, the other fields, because I wanted to be like a web developer. I want to be a
Okay.
web developer for companies and stuff. So, and I believe the other ones were kind of like not really. I mean, they were in the field. They were obviously in the in the general vicinity, but they were like like data analysts. You know what
Right.
I mean, and stuff. And I think one was like I think one was cybersecurity.
Cybersecurity. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. It's
Yeah.
been a while since I've seen that, but yeah, it was pretty clear cut. Like I was like, okay, I want to be a web developer. This is what I want to do. I've seen videos and stuff. Maybe down the road, game developing is definitely, I've heard
Right.
that a lot since I was a kid. Or like in high school and middle school, and like people saying like, yeah, I want to develop games and stuff. So, that kind of
So
that kind of does pique my
that's
interest.
interesting. Why web development? What made you so gung ho about it?
Honestly, I'm gonna be completely honest here. I don't really know. It might have been maybe like the the kind of bias that I kind of just when I was looking up coding and
Mhm.
stuff. I mean, mostly all of it is like web developing. Like, how do you make, what I mean? How you make how you make an application on the thing, like that
Right.
was, it was kind of all the same thing, So
Right.
maybe it just had to do with that. Maybe I just saw it and I was just like, yeah, like that seems fun. That seems like, what I mean? Maybe I should have given it a lot more thought than that, but I don't think so
That's
far.
totally reasonable. What's
Yeah.
interesting is I actually have taught kids as well in the past, and I think you've played games, and you're definitely a gamer. You said you streamed before, and I like playing games as well. Definitely more before than now as well, but I still do. And you naturally I think that, oh, it'd be kind of cool to program this. Like, what would it be like to make this game or something? And I
Mm.
think that there's this tendency I've seen, especially with kids that I've seen, is like, oh, we should teach kids like game development to get into programming. Like, that's the only way that they're going to get their attention, that they're super interested in this field, and we can get into software development. But it turns out that actually that's not actually true. In fact, personally, I actually like web development way more than game development. I like all other types of development way more than game development, even though I love playing games. And I think that it's important to realize that, and especially for people listening, I think, just because you like playing games and participating in games doesn't necessarily mean you will like web develop or game development, right? It's actually a totally different thing. You could also not, right? It might actually make you enjoy games less. It might make you enjoy
Yeah.
games more. You don't know, right? So I think it's definitely important to have kind of that conversation with others and with yourself, and try to figure out what parts of it are interesting to you. I will say though, I think that for web development specifically, and this is why I'm so gung ho about web development, is I think that the amount of people we need in the web development field today is the like just the sheer amount of people that kind of skills gap that we have in this field, and new influx of people we need is very high, because everyone and their uncle needs to develop a web application for what have you, right? For a mobile app, or for this app, or for that app. And the bar to get into web development is also a little bit lower. than some of the other really like hardcore like cybersecurity or AI kind of fields.
Mm.
Not that that's like it's an easy thing by any means. It's just that um, that's kind of your foot in the door, and then you can kind of branch out from there and figure out what you can do. In fact, I actually wish that I had a chance to do more web development when I was doing my computer science degree back in the day, because I think that I would have probably found the path a little bit sooner, per se, perhaps. Yeah, I think that's an important question to ask, and it's just so interesting to hear that you're like, yes, I knew I wanted to do web development right away. So that's pretty cool. So I guess how about the before we get to the syllabus, the part-time, full-time, kind of I guess it's kind of obvious. Obviously, if you're working, you can't really do the full-time. But like, kind of, what was your thinking behind that? Like, should I quit and do the full-time and try to get it done faster, or should I work part-time? Do any of your classmates and colleagues have similar sentiments or decisions that they had to make? Kind of how did that all go?
So I would say, um, I definitely wanted to choose. I definitely chose the part time because I definitely I wanted to put a lot more focus into it. I did do a good bunch of research on the people who did it full time, and not just in Flatiron but also
Mhm.
other boot camps, and they every person said it was just like super intense and
It's like
super
60
stressful.
hours
And
a week or something crazy that I saw that they listed
yep,
on average. Yeah.
basically, yeah, they were just super, like, it was just, you know what I mean. And like, I do have to I do have to work, and I'll be completely honest as well, like it wasn't only that, like, you know that I didn't have like necessarily the time and stuff, but just because like I do also want to factor, like, spending time with my family, you know what I mean, actually having a social life, you know what I mean, like I do want to play games and stuff,
Yeah.
I definitely need an out, so I didn't want to overwhelm myself
Mm.
with it. And to be frank, I also I guess a part of me maybe didn't think that if I did full time, I probably wouldn't have been able to do it. I'm going to be just completely honest. Maybe all of that, because like I said, I was never the kind of, in high school, I would watch people like in these super like high level classes, and so many essays were due, and I was just like, I've never, even in college, I was super like, I was super relaxed and chill, and like, you know what I
Mhm.
mean, like obviously there was stressful points, but I was never put in a huge position where I had an immense load of work to do in such a short period of time, so I wasn't sure if like I'd be able to do it. Hell, even doing part-time,
Yeah.
like doing this now, is
Yeah.
super stressful. Like I swear, like I have like 3 different ticks. I'm not even kidding. Like my fingers twitch. That's how stressed I am. Like it's like work, gym, code, sleep, and then all over again, and
Really.
that's doing it part-time.
Make a
So
t-shirt for you there with that.
yeah,
Jeez.
I know, right?
Um, no,
But
but I
yeah.
think that's a good point. I think that's definitely a consideration I think people need to make. There's all types of people. Some people are really good at like just sitting there and cramming through things, and others would rather do it that way. I think, frankly, you are probably the approach of part-time is probably more accessible to most people, especially I think the nice thing about boot camps is that you can come from another life and then come into this thing with this passion. You don't have to like be born to be a developer, and that that's your
Mm.
mission, and as soon as you're 16 or 17 or whatever, you go into this thing, and like that's your like that, like just ram through it. Like that's not kind of the approach of boot camps, right? It's just like, oh, I'm dabbling. I've had a life in this field or that field, a career even, and I'm switching or switching again. And it's just not feasible for most people to do something full time unless maybe it is kind of your kind of university equivalent or something like that, right? So that's a really really good point. I guess I'm going to get into the syllabus here, but before we get into that, is there any other things you kind of want to share that you kind of you mentioned you were looking through a bunch of YouTube videos on this kind of topic and comment of choosing different boot camps and kind of things to be aware of? Is there anything you want to mention to people watching this?
Um. Um. I I guess I would definitely say. I want to be completely transparent, like tell the like I when I watch like YouTube videos and stuff of like YouTubers and like sharing like how much kind of like they make like and stuff like that, I find that very respectable, and it's very, I find it very eye-opening, and because yeah, so the boot camp is expensive.
Yeah.
It's a 19,000, I think it's 900 or $19,500. So I mean, at least I would say, I mean, I'm not sure what your opinion is on it, but I would say make sure to do your research on it. Make sure to do some coding, like, like some little, you know what I mean? Do it like at least for a couple of days. Make sure it's something that you're at least, very interested in before you kind of put yourself in the position, because I'm already in a lot of debt. Not even
Mhm.
college, I have credit card debt as well, you know what I mean? So if you don't, you know what I mean, like just be careful with putting yourself in that position, you know what I mean? So I mean,
Yeah.
I guess that's what I would say.
No, that's a really good point. Kind of hones back to your point of it's not a get rich quick scheme by any
Mm,
means, right?
yeah, you got to put in the work in there.
Put in the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and make sure you're okay with being a little bit stressed out once in a while. And you can handle that, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's go through this. I think for everyone watching, just I have a PDF open of the Flatiron syllabus, and I was freaking Martin out here by saying I'd like to go through this because there's a whole bunch of sections in this, and he's going to be doing this for the next several months, going through this program, and we're going to be doing these videos hopefully weekly or bi-weekly or something like that, and seeing the progress and the journey throughout. And I said, I'm going to quiz you. I'm going to give you questions, and I'm going to make it hard. I'm going to make it awkward for you. You're going to stutter. You're going to fumble, and people are going to be like, "Oh, Martin, you're not a developer. What does this guy do?" And it's going to be great. It's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, he's sweating already. Good thing he's wearing a black shirt. So,
Yeah.
so it looks like they split the bootcamp up into at least. So this is to be clear, the software engineering bootcamp at Flatiron, and it's a part-time version of that. So you can definitely go online and download the syllabus for that if you're interested. And they split it up into 5 phases, correct? So there's the first phase is front-end development. And that's kind of like learning the basics of kind of JavaScript and HTML and the DOM and just programming in general. And that's the phase that you actually just recently kind of completed and are phasing into phase 2, right? And you mentioned that you're working on React recently, which is phase 2, so front-end web applications, and it's looking primarily working with the React framework and some other tools to actually start working with components and building more complicated web applications. Then there's phase 3, which is the very deep back end of the pool, back end development, which is big and scary sounding. And it looks like they're actually using Python for that, which is an interesting choice, getting to some SQL in there and database topics. And also it looks like integrating different APIs like AI APIs in there as well. There's a phase 4, which talks about backend web APIs and how to use that. So specifically working with JSON APIs like fetch requests, all that kind of stuff, and integrating it with the React application and the Python web application using Flask as a framework for the backend. And then finally, to kind of cap it all off, is like a capstone kind of project, a cumulative project where you actually kind of put all these concepts together and build like a full stack application, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly.
So I guess that's a lot. That was a mouthful of acronyms and fancy sounding technologies. You went through phase 1 already, and how long would you say that took you as like a part-time student?
Well, it took longer than it should have because something came up at the beginning. But I would say a month and a half.
Okay.
I would say, yeah, about a month and a half, maybe more. Yeah.
And how long would you say you spent approximately like per week in that month and a half on average?
Oh, like hourly?
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say maybe like 4 hours a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's quite a lot.
Yeah, but I'll be completely honest though. Sometimes like, it wasn't consistently 3 or 4 hours. Sometimes I would slack off, you know what I mean? Or some days I wouldn't even code.
Right.
I'm being
No,
completely
of
honest,
course, of
like
course, of
sometimes
course.
I did slack off. Yeah. So, I definitely could have worked harder, but yeah, about 3 or 4 hours a day,
So,
maybe
so
like
you're
4 days a
you're
week.
telling everyone here you actually have a life outside of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow. It's
It's
funny how
nice.
that works.
Right.
Interesting. That must be the whole like work-life balancing that people are all going on about these
I
days.
think so.
Yeah.
Rumor has it.
Okay. Okay, cool. So, yeah, that's actually quite a lot. That's more than I anticipated. How did that feel? Like, I know you said you had a bunch of stuff going on while you were going through that, but like the actual process of learning those topics for the first time, like you kind of come into this thing and you're like, I dropped 20 grand on this thing. I hope I made the right choice. I'm coming from this background. I have no idea about this topic. Sure, I did a bit of coding, a bit of YouTube videos, all that kind of stuff. Like kind of walk us through like how did it feel, like what were the first few weeks like, and were there any like senses, like were you uncertain, you're like, oh, did I make the right choice, like what was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, you basically hit it right on the head. Yeah, so it was hard. It was hard. I was constantly asking for help. You know what I mean? I was even like, and this is probably something like if somebody is looking to get into coding as well, and you do have a boot camp that has a reliable, people there to help you. I was constantly asking for help because of how confused I was. You know what I mean? It was one of those things where like, that joke from a while ago where like, where it's like, how do I read a whole paragraph 4 or 5 times and not like, you know what I mean? And it just doesn't, you have no idea what you just read, you know what I mean? And then you're kind of just like, okay, word for word. That was literally me. And I was constantly asking for help.
Mhm.
And that is also one thing that I would add as well. If you do have those resources for people to help you, do not be scared to ask for help. I was constantly like, oh, man, like I hope I don't get that same guy because I've already asked him for 3 times. You know what I mean? Like 3 times is today and stuff. And a lot of people were telling me like, when I was telling them like, hey, sorry, it's me again and everything, they would tell me like, dude, you dropped a lot of money on on this course. Like, get your money's worth. Ask for help when you need help because that was me.
Absolutely.
It was hard. It was
Yeah.
hard.
Did you finally, like, you're finally overcoming that, like you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm feeling comfortable about this now? What do you think it took for you to actually, was it just time spending the course, was it realizing that this is something that you can do, was it
Mm.
seeing other people do it, what did it for you?
The number one thing, code. You have to code. A lot of people, and I'm still guilty of this. I'm still guilty of this to this day, where um, people tend to just want to watch people code and think that that's enough.
Yeah.
It is not. You need to do it. You need to write function, parentheses,
Yeah.
curly brat. You need to write it. You need to, you know what I mean? Like, it's not enough just to see it. You
Hmm.
have to do it for it to actually kind of stick. And yeah, now that I'm not going to say that I'm completely like, oh yeah, JavaScript, like, oh, I got it. But looking back, at phase one, I'm kind of like, oh man, I definitely had that. Like, like, I can't believe I didn't understand that. Yeah. So,
That's actually remarkable, Martin. Like, I think it's important to reflect on that sometimes,
mm,
like really, not to get too cheesy on you or anything, but I think that, here you are coming into this not too long ago, this new, brand new field, this new ocean of knowledge. And you drop all this money on this thing and you're not sure if it's the right thing. You've tried many things before. And you come into this thing and you're getting your feet wet and you're not sure if it's for you. And now here you are, even just a few months later, and you're telling me, right, in front of all these people, no doubt, you're telling us all, um, I'm looking back at that and I crushed it, and I'm comfortable with that. I'm happy with that. I can do it, right? That's impressive. Really. That's amazing.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna lie though. It was a challenge. I don't know if you've seen that meme where it's like coding and it's like a person like kind of climbing, like finally they get to the top of the mountain and then they look and it zooms out and it's like a huge mountain left. You know what I mean? Like, that's definitely like what it was. But I mean, yeah, like it definitely was a climb. But yeah, I can definitely say that, looking back, I can look at myself and be like, come on, man, like, how do you not get that? Like, yeah.
This might be an odd question, but I'll ask it anyways. Happiness wise, how are you feeling about all this? Do you notice that you're enjoying it? Are you happy doing it? Are you forcing yourself to do it? Or do you feel like there's a passion for it behind all this? It's fueling the downs and then the ups. Like how's that all working?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question. I would say that the concepts of coding really do interest me to the point where it's I'm sure people can kind of relate to this, where if they get into something, like whether it be a sport or, just like a hobby or something, or, you know what I mean, like a game, they look into it so much and they don't even realize how much work they're doing to look into getting better at that game or that sport, or, you know what I mean, what have you. That definitely was me. But I'm also going to be honest. Yeah, a lot of the times it does feel, it feels like going to the gym a good bunch of the times, where it's
Mm,
like you need, and actually this is maybe this is a good point to bring up, because I've seen this kind of cultural change within the kind of success uh path, which is basically, before we were told so many things to try to get us motivated, to try to have that motivation to do what we need to do. And now people are saying, dude, screw your motivation. You need discipline, is what you
yes,
need. You need
absolutely.
to go to the gym, even if you don't feel like it. It's not about wanting to feel like it. Screw that. You
Hmm.
got to do it. It's not
Hmm.
about feeling like it. So, yeah, a lot of the times it does feel like going to the gym, where it's like, I don't want to go. But, like, when you do it, when you're there and after, you feel good. You're kind of like, oh man, I'm into this. Like, what? Oh, a
I'm glad
raise.
I
What?
did
You know what
that.
I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And now you're just one further. But it definitely is hard to go to the gym. It's kind of hard to like. I'd rather just do. You know what I mean? But yeah, like, yeah, that's what I would say to that.
The consistency, right? That's
Yep.
that's that's the key.
Yep.
I want to harp on that just a few extra seconds here because I think it's just so fundamental to getting into this. And coding is not about being the smartest person in the room or about reading the most textbooks or watching the most YouTube tutorials or whatever. It really is about putting in the work, as you said, and being consistent about it. And
Mhm.
even if you consistently fail, that is better than someone who tries full ham for a month and then gives up because they burn out, right? You pace yourself, be consistent, try to get some joy out of it if you can. And there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, as with any good thing, and it's going to balance out. And what you'll notice is if you're consistent, just like the gym, you're going to look back and you'd be like, wow, that was me. How did I get over here? And you're going to look back
Mhm.
again after another month and it's going to feel almost exponential, right? The further and further you look back. And that really, really is the secret to really life, actually, but even
Yeah.
learning programming. So I'm glad that you brought that up. All right. So let's go through some of this front end stuff. So I'm gonna make you really sweat here now, Martin.
God.
This is gonna be fun. This is gonna be a fun part for all of us. So I guess I should probably preface this by saying that none of these questions I actually gave to Martin beforehand. In fact, I don't even really have a list of questions. I actually kind of do podcasting style and for the most part, just like to kind of go with the flow of the conversation because I think that leads to the most interesting discussions and it's more organic and natural. So in the spirit of being organic and natural, we're gonna have Martin sweat out of his armpits here when I ask him some front end development questions. So I have the syllabus. And since you were so confident, he was so confident just a few minutes ago. If you even just rewind and watch how confident he was, he's like, I looked back at that phase one section and I would crush that. That's like for noobs, right? I mean, of course, you didn't say that. I'm paraphrasing it and making it a bit fancier than it sounds. But I'd like to test that just a little bit. In future videos, it'll be nice to actually get into the code and maybe I'll share my screen or share your screen and we kind of walk through some of what you're working on and some challenges that you've had and maybe some debugging together and some even interview questions, coding interview questions and things like that. But let's keep it relatively light to start. And I'll give you some low balls. I'll give you some really, really low balls. So based on this syllabus here, it looks like you learned about functions in JavaScript specifically. Right? All types of functions and kind of their purpose in programming. So, in your own words, in as much kind of technical detail as you can, right, as you're capable of, as with your current knowledge, how would you explain functions as best as you can to someone and their purpose and what to use them for?
Okay. So so I would, sorry, my girlfriend walked
Yep,
in.
it's all good.
Um so this is where the mind melting happens.
Good.
So I would say, I'm not sure on the technical wording of it, but I would say Functions are basically, I guess you can think of it in terms of a construction site, I guess you could say,
Okay.
where you're the boss and you're telling worker X, hey, you need to go ahead and assort these piles of woods. You need to sort them and make sure that they're 5 feet long. And you, worker Y, I need you to make sure that this is painted all in white,
Okay.
and make sure to do it in a certain amount of time,
Okay.
and make sure to do it with a specific brush.
Hmm.
That's probably where maybe like, the parameters of functions would come
Mm.
in. You want to make sure to give them, certain values within them that return a certain function expression.
Okay.
uh yeah, so that's what I would basically say. They're kind of basically like your own workers, and you kind of try to give them their own tasks to do for a bigger picture project.
Okay. So I'm gonna really make you squirm a little bit now. So um, if we didn't have functions, how would that analogy change? What would we have to do instead?
If we didn't have functions,
Yeah.
how would that analogy change? What? How does that? If okay, if we didn't have functions, how would the analogy change? Of ex you got me. I have no idea. I have no idea. You got me.
That's a good one. That's good. So just for everyone here, I purposely told Martin that I'm gonna push him to the limits until he really starts freaking out a little bit, because that's the point of all this, right? Is to see that even while you're going through this and feel comfortable with this, there's also still a limit to how far you can go, and the purpose is to expand your boundaries and kind of grow that over time, right? So I guess you're itching for an answer, and I'll give you a bit of an
Yeah.
answer. I won't tease you too hard on that. So I guess like to keep it relatively succinct, we can go in more depth together in future videos. But like, I would say like a function is really just a group of instructions that we can kind of compartmentalize and use in different places. So it's like we have some algorithm like to bake bread, or like you said, to build a house or to saw some wood. And we can take that and we have the instructions needed to do that task, and we can kind of move it around. And we have these abilities to pass in, like you said, parameters. So maybe we can make it say it's a red house, or say,
Yeah.
it's a 5 foot log or whatever. So there's some extra little things we can do on there. But generally speaking, it's some input and it has some thing that it does, and then we have potentially some output, and we can kind of move that around and use it in different places. So if we don't have that, then what we'd have to do is you can think of a function, I guess, as like it allows us to copy and paste the code in a bunch of places without actually copying and pasting it. We can just use the name of the function and call the function. And then we're
Mm.
effectively like copying and pasting that code into where we're calling it. So if we didn't have that function, we would just have to copy and paste the code outside again. We would have to repeat of a whole bunch of code just scattered all over our application. And it would just literally be copies and pastes of all that code, like start to finish,
Oh, okay.
brought out of the
Yeah.
function.
Yeah.
Right. So now instead of changing it in one place, we'd have to change it in like 10 different places potentially. Things like that. Right. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. I wasn't trying to trick you too hard there. um, all right. Let's do a couple more here if you're okay with that, because
Okay.
these are fun. I think that this will take to good places. Um, so variable scope, I guess that's kind of interesting. We can get quite deep with that. I don't want to stress you out too much with that one. So let's go to the next one. This is everyone's favorite: working with data structures in JavaScript. So I'm not going to make you code a binary tree or anything crazy like that. Well, that's for future episodes.
Okay.
But I think I asked this in a previous interview video that we did. So it's listed here that you learned about arrays and objects.
Oh God.
Yeah, yeah. You know where I'm going with this. So what, again, in your own words, technically, what is an array, and when do we use it, and why do we use it, and what does it do?
Oh man. Okay. I literally Googled this after I saw that you asked this to Eli, and I forgot the answer, but um I think he was in the general ballpark where it does store, information, and it does have like, it's like natural indexing. I
Mhm,
believe it does start it yeah, indexes start at 0.
mhm, mhm.
Um and you basically use it when you when you want
Look at this, everyone. Just look at this. This is great. Isn't this great? Like, just look at this and this pain and suffering that Martin is going through right now. That is how much more genuine.
$20,000. um yeah, so when you would use it, I guess, is, I guess when you necessarily don't want to. Oh man, I feel like it's gonna be completely wrong, but when you don't want to put in information that isn't necessarily as detailed as you wanted, unless it's something like objects, like let's say you had an array of, you know, you had an array of, cars,
Okay.
maybe it's like a Toyota, a Ford, you know what I
Okay.
mean.
Okay.
You kind of just want to access that one specific a value,
Okay.
as opposed to an object that, it has more values within it. Like it can be also a car, but it can also be like, okay, well, if this is a car, what color is the car, and then what, you know what I
Mm,
mean, like how much does it cost, you know what I mean,
mhm,
where did you get
mhm,
it from, what's the owner's name and stuff.
mhm, mhm. Okay, that's not bad. That's really not bad. I think it's a hard question, to be fair, honestly. Like, and I think that this is kind of the point of asking these silly sounding questions, is that um, you can actually tell a lot about someone's technical aptitude and abilities even by answering questions like this. I know a lot of people obviously argue otherwise, but it's not a trivial question. We use these objects every single day. Like, literally, you probably use arrays and objects all over the place. And sometimes we forget, like, what is the purpose of this thing? What is it used for? What does it actually do? How does it work? And, how does it break? What are the kind of breaking points of this thing? So I guess I'll give you a short answer again for this one, just so I won't carrot dangle you too much. I think I probably said the same thing in the other interview with Eli, but it's basically just a place to store stuff, right? It's
Mm.
it's it's a box. You put stuff in the
Oh,
box,
wow.
and you can get stuff out of the box using, as you said, indices, and they're sequential. So I put one thing in the box, I put another thing in the box. The thing after is directly after the first thing that I put in the box. And I can add and remove things from this box and add and access them. And the things in that box can be as simple or as complicated as I want, but they are still singular things. Object.
Mm.
I can put a bunch of strings in there. I can put a bunch of objects in there, or I can put a bunch of arrays in the array, right? But kind of, you hinted at it earlier, unlike an object, which is kind of a similar, it's a box, but it has keys and values, and we
Mm.
can kind of store more information and nest information, and we can kind of get into things like that with objects. So yeah, it's not a trivial question. Again, even my answer is probably, you could elaborate much more on that and get deeper technically, but yeah, we'll practice some of those together when we get towards the interviewing stuff as well. You good for a couple more, or are you kind
Yeah,
of
no,
soaking in emotion
I
here?
like I said, I kind of want them to see me kind of
Yeah.
like squirm, I feel like it makes them feel like, oh, I could do it, if this guy could, I'm down. Yeah, let's do more.
All right, let's do a couple more. So you supposedly learned
Uh-huh.
JavaScript and the DOM. That was a joke. That was a joke. So from your understanding, what is this DOM, the document object model? What is it?
Uh I was hoping you would ask me about the scope because I actually know that one. So basically, I would basically just kind of say the DOM is, you know, a web application with every single thing, torn off until you finally get just a white blank wall,
Mhm.
and you want to, the basic idea is that you want to add stuff to the wall, you want to add the background, you want to add the the sort of like functions that have that, whether it's like a to do kind of application where you add the to dos and then you delete them, um and yeah, that's I guess that's basically what I would say. DOM is basically kind of like a huge like the poster of,
Mm.
a clean poster that you want to add things to.
Yeah, yeah, that's a pretty good abstraction. And I guess if we were to go a little bit technically deeper than that, you could really just say that it's a way for us to touch HTML from JavaScript. So we can
Mm.
go into that canvas that you mentioned and put things in it from JavaScript. because without it, we would have no ability to create an element or to enter HTML or to what have you, right? We would be, JavaScript would be over here and HTML would be over here. But with the DOM, we can actually connect these two and actually talk to the HTML and do things here with JavaScript.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah, it's a hard question. That's not a trivial one by any means. Let's give you a little ball. You said you know about the scope, so let me give you that one. Did you study Clojure?
I think very, very briefly.
Okay. Let's go with another one then. I guess just generally speaking, how does scope kind of work in JavaScript? And when I'm talking about something like the global scope, what am I talking about?
Okay. So I think I could do this one.
All right.
So the global scope is basically if something is in the global scope, it can basically be accessed by virtually anything, you know, that you're creating, and it doesn't matter what it is. You know, it can be inside of a function, it can be inside of a function that has a you know, an if statement and an if statement within that if statement, you know, or you know, you can go as deep as you want, and it'll still have access to that global. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's great. So what's the kind of counter, the opposite of global scope?
I guess that would I think I understand the question. It's would basically be like, you know, the function scope, you know, right, or the block scope.
Right.
You know,
local scope.
Yeah, or the local scope. Where it's basically if something is defined within a function that is not going to be accessible, you know, in the global scope. You can't use it in another function. But and the same thing is true within that function. If you write, like, let's say you build a function and you put const you know, x is equal to 100, and then you create, you know, an if statement that is going to be accessible within that if statement. But the reverse isn't true, where if you declare something within that if statement, it's not going to be accessible in that function in the outer.
Perfect. Good. Okay. No, that's good. You said, there you go. Yes! He got one, everyone. He got one. Oh, that's awesome. That's great. I should emphasize, right? Like, obviously,
wait, I did get it right. You're not being nice.
Yeah, you did. No,
okay,
you
cool.
got it. You got it. You got
it. Okay.
Obviously, we can go really deep, and we'll get to closures and stuff at some point later, just so you can really fundamentally understand some of those more tricky concepts that are still exactly what you just said. But the point of this was to kind of make it so that you couldn't answer the question, to be completely honest, right? Because these questions are vague enough that you can have people basically answer them very high level and vaguely, and you can have people go full ham and go like super deep, like to the like transistor level sometimes, right? And those are very different types of developers and knowledge bases that they draw from. So I saw here that actually I found this really fascinating as part of the curriculum, and I actually would love to incorporate this in some of the classes that I teach, and probably even on the YouTube channel. I don't know if you can speak to this very much, but it looks like there's sections on AI-assisted debugging, prompt engineering, project assistance with AI. What are those? Did you guys touch on that much, or kind of like how did they incorporate that into the curriculum, or is that just kind of part of the syllabus here, but you didn't really touch on it very much?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I don't think I've touched on, you know, debugging and, you know, how to you know, debug, you know, within like you know, within the devs tools and stuff. I don't know if that, I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, or within within VS Code and stuff. But yeah, that's about as much as I've done of that.
Interesting. So was there any mention, I guess, at this kind of more intro level of kind of ramping you up to front-end development? Was there any mention of things like the hip thing these days, like ChatGPT, or any tools and technologies like that for helping with searching for things as opposed to just Googling or Stack Overflowing for things?
No, but I think they will, though. I think it's further down the road. But yeah, there is a lot of what you were just saying, where they do tell you like Google is your friend, you know what I mean? Like make sure you're looking these stuff up.
Yeah.
But no, not that much mention on like Chat GPT.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you heard of your classmates talk about it much or use it much or question whether they should be using it or?
No, I've seen it in Discords and stuff. But
Okay.
no.
Interesting. Cool. I'd like to eventually incorporate that. I think it is a good tool if used correctly. Also dangerous tool if not used correctly. So it'd be fun to kind of take a look at that at some point together. Cool. Yeah, there's a few other topics in here, but I think maybe if people are interested, they can definitely download the syllabus and take a look and read through that for the Flatiron software engineering program syllabus. Reading through this, there's a lot of really interesting things in here. I do want to mention kind of I don't want to keep you for too long today, Martin, because I know it's getting late there. But it is kind of interesting that, for example, a lot of bootcamps seem to do this, like the backend portion. It looks like they're getting into Python and using like Flask and some other frameworks to actually build out these backend servers and talk to SQL databases and things like that. Is that a part of what interested you in joining this? Did you even know what Python was? Did you think it was a snake before you joined? Like kind of like how did you go about kind of making sure that the curriculum aligned with what you were interested in?
Yeah, so actually, I guess a little bit of a fun fact. They actually didn't have Python as part of the curriculum
Oh,
until this year. Yeah, that was
cool.
part of the reason why, in the research that I did, for coding and stuff, I did see that Python was, a really well used language. So I was kind of that was one of the things, like I called the recruiters and I was telling them like, hey, I didn't I do want to be a backend developer. I do want to, what I mean, stuff like that. Like, are you guys going to incorporate any of those kinds of things? Like you can and stuff. And she kind of cut me off. She was like, actually, yeah, we are. This year we're actually going to implement Python
Wow.
into the curriculum. And I was like, oh, really? Cool. Like that's awesome and stuff. So yeah.
So you're going to be a backend developer. I'm gonna tease you on that for a second. So, what about the front end? You don't want to do the front end. You want to jump straight to the back end. You want to be full stack. What made you think that?
Honestly, this is kind of gonna be a little bit dumb, but I when I was like when I was learning HTML and CSS, actually before that, when I was doing the coding before I was deciding to be a coder, you know what I mean, like, or to pursue it, I was doing like those kinds of like little kind of
Mm,
websites. I think it's like what are they called? They're called like
like little
I forget. There's a
exercises and stuff.
bunch, yeah, where you could do exercises and stuff. Um, I was doing a bunch of those, and oh my god, sorry, I lost train of thought. What was the question again?
Like what made you interested in becoming a backend developer? You said you're doing
Oh
HTML,
yes,
CSS.
sorry,
That's okay.
sorry. Yeah. So when a lot of the exercises that we were doing was for HTML and CSS and stuff, and I'm gonna be honest, it didn't feel or look cool. It didn't feel or
Wow.
look cool.
Oof.
I didn't really
Ouch.
like it. HTML looks so like bland. It looks
Oof.
so like, yeah.
Oh.
I'll be completely honest on that. I'll
This
cop
is
to
the
that. That's
opinions
why it
of
just,
Martin, not of Natter over
yeah,
here, just for those on the
yeah.
channel.
Natter
I'm
does
just
not
te- I'm
endorse
just I'm
the
just teasing
comments.
you. I'm just teasing you. But yeah, like elaborate on that. So like what do you mean by that? And what made you realize that? And then what made you think that backend was the answer?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of more of a process of elimination. You know what I mean? Like I know, like I didn't, you know what I mean? I mean, I do like it. You know what I mean? It is cool when you can make some like the everything like look really like nice and professional and stuff. It is
Right.
really nice and everything. But I really liked like the back end for portion of like creating functions, and you know what I mean, like
Right.
making these sort
The
of like
logic.
tasks. Exactly, I really like doing that, you know what I mean.
Mhm.
um
You don't like centering divs all day?
no, no. No, it's too hard. No, yeah, but and yeah, HTML, I'll be honest too, it was a little bit, too easy, if that makes
Mm.
sense. If it was, I mean, I was
Look at
scratching
this
the surface.
confidence.
I was scratching the surface, but I did feel like a lot of the stuff too, you could just kind of, and I feel like this is probably true of like a lot of of the field, is that you can kind of just like Google it, copy and
Mm,
paste kind of
mhm,
thing.
mhm,
You can
mhm.
kind of just be like, how do I round the corners of the, you know what I mean, of this button and stuff, and it'll
Right,
just be there. You just, how do I make a button look like it's pressed when it's pressed? And then you
right.
just copy, you know, it was kind of just a lot of that. And I was like, I want to learn, you know, I want to learn like the logic, like you said, like the logic of
Yeah.
something, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, think through it and come up with solutions and see which is better and things like that,
It
right?
also didn't feel doing that. It also didn't feel like it was it felt like kind of anybody could do it, you know? And I was
Mm,
kind of like, is that something that I kind of want to focus on? Like, I'd rather do something that's harder to do and
right,
be more valuable
right,
to, you know what I
right.
mean?
The
I might be
skill
completely
cap.
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might be completely wrong though. You know what I mean? Like maybe, you know what I mean? It is a lot harder than it seems. And I'm just kind of, you know, I'm a layman, you know what I mean? So,
Mm.
but that's what I was getting out of it.
No, that's great. I think that's an important point to make. I think a lot of people feel that, to be honest. There's a joke in the industry. It's like the back end people, they hate the front end people, and the front end people, they hate the back end people. And the reason is because the back end people actually are terrified of HTML and CSS and centering divs, and they never want to deal with that in their life. And the front end people are terrified of the logic and login and passwords and all
Uh,
this crazy business logic. They
it's
don't want to
funny.
deal with that. So the interesting thing is that it's kind of in the middle somewhere, as most things. Um, Now that you're getting into phase two, where you're looking into React more, that is, I would say, modern front end web development. So it's no
Mm.
longer just HTML and CSS. That's
Oh
the
God.
fundamentals of it.
Uh,
So it turns out that it's actually not a trivial thing, front end development, as it was maybe in the past, like maybe 10, 15 years ago, where it was mainly just HTML and CSS and a few other things like that. Front end definitely was, I would say, probably a bit more trivial, you could say. But these days, it's definitely non-trivial. These frameworks are changing every single year. There's all these new ones coming out. There's crazy stuff. In fact, the front end probably is changing more than the back end these
yeah.
days, and it's kind of
Actually,
wild.
actually, you've honestly, yeah, because I forgot I am learning React right now,
Yeah.
and it is super hard. It is I don't know how that's, yeah, you're right. Yeah, your React is like super duper duper hard. It's really annoying. You're right. Yeah, it's definitely harder than it. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it hard in the back end? I don't know. I think they're hard in their own ways, and both are going to be useful. Hence the term full stack. And I think that if you're comfortable with both sides, that's the kind of like mythical unicorn of the full stack developer. And sometimes some people gravitate to the logic side, some people gravitate to the kind of styling and the React front end side, and some people can do both. So definitely hold your horses before poo-pooing too much on the front end side until you get to the React side, and then maybe you can like see how that works relative to the actual backend stuff.
True.
Cool, man. So I think, yeah, I don't want to take again too much of your time. I think that was a lot of fun. I'd like us to do this more often and kind of keep it as casual but as informative for people as possible. I'd love to thank you again for spending the time with me. I know it's quite late there, and then you were stressing a little bit about this and worried about how it would go, and me flaming to you too hard on some of these questions. But I guess now looking back, now that we're kind of at the tail end of this first one together, the introductions, like what are your thoughts if you were to kind of sum up kind of your feelings and kind of everything that we talked about, and some advice for new developers or people even just looking to get into this field? Kind of what would you say to them, or your previous self not too long ago?
That's a good question. So I guess what I would say is that I'm definitely scared. I'm scared. I'm gonna be completely honest. I'm scared. I'm nervous. But I'm also very very excited. I'm very very excited because you were saying this to me, you know, in our messages and stuff. Where like, you know, you're gonna look back and you're gonna, you know, we're gonna see who you were. You know what I mean? And like, you know, you're gonna look at this guy and like, who is this guy? You know what I mean? So I'm definitely excited about that. I think if I kind of wanted to tell somebody um looking into the field, I guess, or like my younger self or something, is that uh it really doesn't, and I think I would be kind of like, you know, kind of like living proof of this. It really doesn't matter, you know, where you come from, who you are, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. None of that matters. What matters is if you're willing to get up and put in the work, even though you
Mhm.
don't want to, because you know it's what you have to do. You know,
Absolutely.
you may look ahead and you may see like a huge scary mountain and stuff, but the only way forward is one step at a time. You know what I mean? So, you know, get to step, so
Absolutely. Just start.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, start.
Keep it
Yeah,
consistent, one step at a time.
exactly.
Don't worry about 100 steps from now. Just tomorrow, day after that, one at a time, right?
Yeah, and also like one of the last thing I guess I'll say is that um this field, and I guess you could say that about a lot of fields, but I think this one in particular, that I kind of tell a lot of people is that you get what you put in.
Mm-hmm.
This is something where your learning doesn't have to stop anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You can pick up your phone and you can look up videos, you can look, you know what I mean, you can look up
Absolutely.
documentation, you can learn, and you can put in so much work, and the only person that can stop you is you. Like literally,
Absolutely.
you're the only person. So, you know, like put in the work, and you'll be good.
Do you read documentation on the bus?
Nope. When I can, but none of the most.
That's awesome. That's really good advice though. So yeah, so I think for everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed that. And big kudos to Martin here, and thank you again for spending the time with us and sharing your knowledge and your experience. We're planning to do this weekly or bi-weekly and see Martin progress, and we'll spend some time together also doing some kind of exercise work together and answering questions. And now that he's in kind of this phase 2, I think it's a good point to actually jump straight over to that. Maybe we can do like a quick recap on some of the front end stuff, and I'll really ream you on the DOM and some of the array and object stuff. But I think we can quickly move over to the React stuff and actually start following you along the curriculum as you're going through it. And actually seeing kind of the ups and downs as you're going through it, but also how the support structure works and kind of how this works for someone following along and maybe interested in doing their own bootcamp in the future. So that's the goal for this series, at least. Hopefully, that's the dream. So thank you again, Martin, for the time. And thank you everyone for watching. We'd love to hear in the comments kind of what you thought of this, or if you have any ideas or feedback for us for the next set of videos. Until next time, we'll see you later.